It's a great day in Texas. It's a hot day in Texas. It's a hot day in the nation's capital because Roe V Wade has been overturned. This is now news for you, but what you haven't been looking at necessarily is the big macro story as to what's really going on in the country as a result of this. And predictably, we're looking at the hysteria on the left. And I want you to reinterpret all the news because, you know, a lot of you are prone to anxiety when you see the streets combusting and the anarchy coming out. But you need to look at this like deliverance. Look at it like when God is moving and the devil's manifesting. It sometimes is an indication that the devil is mad and God is glad. And that's why you got to rejoice when you see a little bit of the chaos, because it shows that there's a divine order beginning to come in, answering your prayers, and not a moment too soon. On our show today, we have the ever-effervescent Mercedes Sparks to help bring information to its clarifying point of penetration. And Nilsa Alvarez is helping us today. She is a political strategist, activist in the grassroots, the kind that we need to talk to that's actually out there where the battle is. And I got Carl flying the desk there. Jonathan Monin is not here. He has the audacity to take a vacation, which I don't understand why people do these things. But Carl's covering because Carl's here all the time, ready to fill the gap. Thank you, Carl.
Doing what I can.
For being there.
Looking quite dapper today, Carl.
I'm going to say, always throwing me off. I never know quite what to expect with him. But today, he keeps you on your toes because you never know quite what
The
Carl's...
beard's trimmed, you got a vest on, pen in the pocket, ready?
Making me nervous. He's looking like a capitalist all of a sudden. I don't know. But from the anarchist is becoming a capitalist. All right, so the Mercedes, Nilsa, what the news cycle, of course, I know that people have already seen some of this, but I want to capture the significance of the headlines. So we're looking at, for instance, AOC. What did AOC do today that helps us understand what insurrection really looks like? What did she do? She's on the Capitol steps, or is she in front of the Supreme Court?
In front of the Supreme Court. Yeah.
Never at a loss for a great photo op. And what is she saying? What's she saying, Nilsa?
She's chanting that the overrule was illegitimate and that the people must go into the streets.
The people must take their rage to the streets. So we're going to blame her for all of the looting and destruction and chaos, which, you know, the left is always talking about the overthrow of democracy. Well, all that this ruling says is the states can decide. Roe v. Wade should have been that way from the beginning.
It was really funny, though, too. I wish we had the clip. Maybe we can get the clip in post. But where she said, you know, for women and birthing people. And it's like, birthing people?
And all the men. No womb is safe, male or female. That's what AOC will lead you into a clarifying future. Although one of the headlines in Twitter that you read on that Life thing, what was hilarious?
Yeah, in Life News. I like that they said liberals suddenly know what a woman is today.
Clarifying moment. They know what a woman is. At least they know that much. But here's my favorite one, of course. Maxine Waters is always reliable. She's the one that was encouraging people to get in the face of Republicans in restaurants or on the street and harass them. A real insurrectionist, if I was to say so. She says, "To hell with the Supreme Court. We will defy them." Bravely spoken from California. Obviously not in Texas. So, of course, Merrick Garland, who is always a disappointment. When I consider the fact that he was once a candidate for the Supreme Court, do you guys remember this? When they were discussing who the first candidate should be, the establishment Republicans, the Lindsey Grahams and Mitch McConnells of this world, were feeling positive about Merrick Garland as a Supreme Court justice. Can you see the mercy of God in keeping us from that guy? So it's like having a Sith Lord in charge of the Boy Scouts. So Justice Department releases statement on Roe v. Wade. Garland vows to use every tool to fight. Well, that's not his job, is to use every tool to fight. His job is to be a neutral agent protecting the Constitution and going after terrorism and domestic crime. And why does he go after the crime in the streets or every tool to stop the border from being invaded with 1 million people? No, he's going to use it to fight a political battle against conservatives.
Yeah. And what'll be really interesting, too, when you talk about, you know, rioting in the streets, well, DHS just came out and warned Catholic churches about a night of rage following this decision. You were talking about Jane's revenge earlier. And so, I mean, unfortunately, you know, we do kind of pre-record these a little bit. So we're on the day, and everybody's projecting that that tonight there's going to be all sorts of attacks, mainly on Catholic churches.
Yeah. There's flyers around D.C. And I saved the picture because it's already being posted. And some leftist organizers are saying these are done. Much of this is even done without us. They're even trying to figure out who's putting these out. And it says D.C. call to action, night of rage, just as Mercedes said. The night SCOTUS overturns Roe v. Wade hit the streets, which happens to be the same thing that AOC said in her chant. And it says, you said you'd riot. To our oppressors, if abortions aren't safe, you're not either. Jane's Revenge, that's what they're calling it.
Yeah, and I'm convinced Jane's Revenge is nothing but, I'm telling you, it's a rebooting of the Antifa activists under a new shell. Because what the left does is they create, like Occupy Wall Street is the same group that basically would be the Antifa or BLM. So they create new entities all the time. But it's like D'Souza came up with some very interesting information that nobody's paying attention to, and that is that 65 of the 300 mules that they found in Atlanta, 65 of them have criminal records in other cities for riot and destruction, which means it's the Atlanta-based team that works in all cities in order to do the riots and destruction. And 65 of the people that were running those ballots are on the payroll to be paid anarchists.
Yeah, their cell phones. What it was is their cell phones were also at those riots.
Yes, their cell phones were at the
Their cell
riots.
phone device was trafficking, and then also
That's
at
right.
the riots.
And so you can assume the cell phone device was with them, and it wasn't lifted from them by somebody that did rioting and then returned it to the house so that they could use it to peacefully collect votes. But President Trump, to add fuel to the fire, as only the dear president could, he says he gives glory to God for this. So he just takes it the next level. He says, this is an act of God, people. I'm glorifying God. Now, of course, who was the guy that put the Supreme Court justices in? The conservative, it was me, but it's an act of God.
Yeah, well, and when you think, I actually, when I heard this today, I fell to my knees and I started to pray and to thank God, because this is honestly a but God situation. Of 50 years, Lance, we've endured. I was born into this, and this is truly the pro-life generation. And it is a but God moment. God moved the people. The people are the ones who hold the authority. The people are the ones who get to elect officials, and moved on the people to elect a rough around the edges man like Trump. And I really, of all the candidates, I truly believe Trump was the only one that had the commitment and drive to put in conservative justices like this. And then even, Lance, when it was leaked, this ruling that we were about to see was leaked, 2 months ago, and the justices, under threat of life, still held to their principles. This is 100% a but God moment, and a thing only God could have done through the people.
Yes, and President Trump said, God made this decision. And we pro-lifers, we're celebrating today. This is historic. This is historic. Now, I just want to announce that there will be a fake news pushed out by the left. They're going to say things like the Supreme Court justices removed from the Constitution one's right to abort. That right was not in the Constitution to begin with. So let's get the truth out there right now. So if you see that fake news hit your feeds, please counter it with the truth. That right wasn't there, and the correct interpretation of the Constitution was upheld today.
And read the ruling. I mean, the one that was leaked 2 months ago was profound, what was written in it. And so to your point, I mean, it's an entire defense of the fact that it is actually not outlined in the Constitution as a right. In fact, it's the complete opposite.
Yep.
And of course, Obama is, of course, most presidents have the decency to stay out of office when they're out of office, except for Obama. He's still running the Democrat Party. So, I mean, you don't hear Clinton trying to grab headlines. You don't you never do. You didn't hear former presidents trying to grab. It was almost like a protocol in the club, except for the activists.
If you could just specify, though, it's Bill Clinton who doesn't grab the headlines. Hillary does. Just to specify which Clinton we're.
All right, okay, I'll give you that one. Across the country, here's what Obama says. States have already passed bills restricting choice. If you're looking for ways to respond, and he gives the, the Planned Parenthood, USO Women. These are all the organizations that are funded by the left. And many other groups have been sounding the alarm on this issue for years and will continue to be on the front lines because, from his perspective, that this is what happens when you have politicians getting involved with ideologies Oh, here we go. Here's the quote. Today, the Supreme Court not only reversed nearly 50 years of precedent, it relegated the most intensely personal decision someone can make to the, now catch the language, this is the manipulative language of mind control, to the whims of politicians and ideologues, attacking the essential freedoms of millions of Americans. One could equally say that in the face of all of the pressure on politicians generated by ideologues, that today there was an essential freedom restored to the millions of babies that have not had a voice in their own survival. That's another way of saying it.
Yeah. And also, what a deceptive lie. If you still want to abort your baby and you live in these liberal states, you can. And, thanks to woke capitalism, your company will pay to put you in a state to have an abortion. You like Starbucks, you like Lululemon, Uber, they'll all pay for it. So like if you want an abortion, you can go get an abortion. But let's be really clear. The choice to have a baby or not have a baby does not happen after you've already conceived the baby. Have protected sex. Do you know how many different types of contraceptive there is out there? Give me a break.
So why is there no public campaign about avoiding pregnancy so that you're not endangering the life of the unborn?
Exactly.
Why isn't there that kind of hue and cry? Because we're living in a manipulated media moment.
But you know what, too? It's like the old, worn-out, essentially lies of the left are just so passé in 2022. This isn't the 1970s. You know, we know today that a baby in the womb has a completely different DNA structure than what the mother does. We didn't know that in the 70s. Blood typing, sometimes it has a completely different blood type. This isn't like it's my kidney or my liver that I might donate that has the exact same DNA and blood that I do.
It's not my body, my choice. It's another body growing inside me.
And this lie of, it's just a clump of tissues, it's just some cells in there. Yeah, sure, maybe in the 70s and 80s that would have worked, but we have 3D ultrasounds today where you can scan that belly and you see the face of the baby. You see the fingers of the baby. It doesn't look like a little lima bean on a little ultrasound anymore. You see it's a human
no longer
life.
this is it a human being or not? Well, it isn't. Well, now we know. How about the heartbeat bill? The heartbeat bill was the one that really, I think, started this. Was in Mississippi where it really got traction going to the courts, and they had to rule on that. It was one of the rulings that came out. And it was whether the state had the right to authorize after 15 weeks that it was going to not be doing an abortion. Why? Because the heartbeat bill, they could see a heartbeat, they could detect it. Trust the science, Democrats, trust the science.
And thanks to the innovative technology in surgery today, an unborn child can receive surgery within the womb for life-saving procedures, and the child is given painkiller. Anesthesia, because they know that the child can feel pain. So if an unborn child... I
didn't know that. Now, see, this is all the layers of this story, so they can actually perform surgery on the child, the baby, on the baby in the womb, and give it anesthesia, because that way the child doesn't feel the pain.
So all the technological advances to protect the unborn life in a family that obviously wants to protect that life and make sure that that child is born healthy, all the science is there to support life. And yet they're trying to say that science is not saying that that life in the womb isn't really life until the mother deems it life. And yet a little speck of bacteria on Mars is considered life. So it just shows where our values
life on Mars.
are.
Any form of life on Mars, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's life.
It's life.
Well, the Hispanic community is going to continue to play a significant role in the culture of America, and we have something here that is hopeful. Nilsa, you work on the grassroots with a lot of the movement among Hispanics. What can you tell us about where they're at in terms of this issue?
Well, the Hispanic community is one of the most pro-life communities out there, and the most pro-family. We are seeing a record-breaking number of Hispanic parents showing up at school board meetings to advocate against the radical sex education happening in schools. We're seeing a record-breaking number of Hispanic women leaving their homes and running for office as Republicans or conservatives. We're seeing, and that's happening in New Mexico and in other states. We just saw that here in Texas,
Yeah, we did.
where a Democrat district that was Democrat for over a century is now flipped Republican thanks to Mayra Flores. We're seeing just a revival. I love to call it that because it really is. It's that Hispanics are seeing that Hispanic values, which are conservative values by majority, are under attack. And the pandemic simply exposed that even more. The closures exposed that. When they were exposed to their child's curriculum, they realized that's wrong. You know, what they're teaching you isn't exactly what you're supposed to be taught. So they're rising up, and we're seeing it. There's a poll that I'm aware of that was recently done on newly registered Hispanics between May of 2022 and May of 2024. And it shows in the state of Florida that among non-Cuban Hispanics, there's an increased support towards Republicans by 16.1%. And among Cuban Hispanics, it's 28%. In Texas, we're seeing an increase among Hispanics by 13.5%. And in Arizona, where there was a lot of, a lot of election fiasco news, right? We're seeing an increase of Hispanics supporting Republicans by 17.3%. So it's growing. And the disapproval rates, or should I say the approval rates, that they gave Biden this morning was down to 36% among the American population. That's actually lower. We know because when media says, oh, his approval rates are at 36, usually they try to put it a little higher just to make, kind of save face.
Not a little higher. It's questionable whether it's 30. I wonder why 36% of the country is cheerleading. I mean,
yeah, what is to cheer? I keep asking, what has he successfully passed? Or what has he succeeded since entering office? Like, what has he been good at? Name just one piece of effective public policy. And no one that has actually supported him been able to name one thing. They can't.
Well, I think that the Democrats are going to be they're already saying this, and Pelosi's saying it. We now have the issue for the midterms. So the hope on the left is, if it wasn't Russia, if it isn't Trump, if it isn't January 6th and the insurrection, what can we use that could become the galvanizing war cry? They believe that this is going to be the issue. But the data is showing that more people are passionate about economics than they are about this issue. Because even on the left, when you start to go to the Democrats and say, well, are you for late-term abortion? Are you for the ghastly procedure of cracking open the skull? I'm sorry to say this, sucking out the brains. This is the procedure when you're dealing with a fully formed infant in the womb, to take it out in the 8th month, the 9th month. And it's like, oh, no. So the repulsion on the left moves it back to, we believe that the women has a right, but they have a right to choose, but they're not certainly advocating for after birth abortion or destruction, like the nut job in Virginia was postulating. We'll keep the baby nice and warm and let the mother decide if she wants to keep it or what, destroy it?
Yeah, well, you have places like New York and California where they're trying to push, and some have actually succeeded in allowing that a mother can kill her infant within the first week of birth. That's not even abortion; that's infanticide, and we need to call it what it is.
So here's the unfortunate metaphor. They think that this abortion ruling is going to add fuel to the midterm fire against Republicans, except the price of fuel is going to be so expensive that it's going to actually be the wrong metaphor.
But you know what? I think this is going to have the complete opposite effect for the Christian conservative base. I think today is a day that many people 5 years ago, 10 years ago, thought this day would never come. This wasn't even possible. So today's takeaway is that anything is possible. If you understand how civics work, if you understand how the government works, and the church wakes up to civic engagement, anything is possible. We just overturned one of the biggest Goliaths that I have lived with my whole life, and we are now in a pro-life generation. And the people on our side, when you look at the protesters out there today, it's all old people that are pro-abortion. It is young people who are saying, no, we're a pro-life generation. Science says this isn't my body. It isn't my choice. My choice is to have sex or not have sex.
And I really wish the Catholic Church would, the Catholic Church has been a problem because they've been with Pope Francis. They've been largely helping and facilitating the immigration crisis we've got, because there's Catholics that are providing safe houses, et cetera, working with the left-wing activists for passage. But if they attack the Catholic Church, if they make the Catholic Church universally the enemy, when the 50% of the Catholics are voting Democrat, 50% are voting Republican, I think it's going to produce an adverse effect. I think the Catholics will feel like the Democratic Party is hostile to them. So they've got to be very careful about targeting Catholic churches. And didn't you say, I don't know if we were live on the air or not, did you talk about they're targeting
DHS
Catholic churches in Washington?
Pregnancy centers and pro-life centers, as well as Catholic churches, they're being targeted for the night of rage. So, and important that we say this.
That's right.
We know that the CIA and the FBI are aware that these flyers are going around. We know that they're being tagged on social media so that they're made aware of what's at stake in DC and around. So they can't come later on and say they didn't know this was going to happen. They better be protective of our Capitol, because if we're the public in general is trying to flag them to stop this insurrectionist movement that we're seeing outside the Supreme Court, and we need to stop this. So DOJ, please do your job.
Yeah, I love how they are at least being honest. It is the night of rage, not the night of tolerance and love and acceptance, like the progressive movement says that they are. But it is, in fact, the night of rage. So I've just prayed tonight. You know, we've got to pray. We've got to pray for these justices. They remain safe.
If I was a justice, I wouldn't go home. Like they're already going to go to Clarence Thomas's house, and so they're going to say that they're protesting Clarence. The leftist group announces mass protests outside of Justice Clarence Thomas's home tonight, and this is where I wish we had better control over media, because what I would say if I was in control of a big media outlet is leftists target, first African-American male on the Supreme Court to attack him. It's like, why are they attacking the first African-American justice? That's how I would put it, instead of attacking Supreme Court justice. But they're going to continue to do this, and it's not just the justices. It's going to go down to the states. So watch what happens in the states. Because all this does is it says the states are going to determine what's going to. Now you're going to see the attacks going to the local politician, because it's done on the national level. I mean, they could do whatever they want for theater, but now you're going to watch what's going to take place in the various states that are going to implement this. And some they have trigger laws, right? And here's my theory. My theory is there are Republicans, swampy institutional Republicans, who have given lip service to pro-life because it helps them get elected, who never expected that the law was going to be overturned, who now have to bear the resistance. And now they're going to have to actually reveal whether they are for life or not, because they're going to have to take it. It's no longer just a party platform issue. It's kind of like the Israel move with the embassy. Nobody had to deal with it because no president had the chutzpah to actually move. The moment the decision was made, Republicans are nervous, because it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to actually do it. I also think Democrats, I wonder if there aren't Democrats in certain part of the country that are going to have a problem actually fighting on the front lines of choice when it comes down to this issue. I think that this could be certain Democrat territory where they're going to have pro-life Democrats because they have Hispanic votes. They're looking at their own political survival. Is that far-fetched, Nelsa?
Not far-fetched at all. They're going to have, look, they just changed their spiel on police. They went from defund the police to, refund the police.
To my point,
They changed their rhetoric. I mean, even in Hispanic media, there was a moment where Univision put out a piece that said, hey, stop coming in illegally. Like, they even said it to our Hispanic community in just a few little portions of their news segments, because they realize this is hurting the people we want to see elected in November. So so you could see the rhetoric start changing. And like you said, the trickle effect or the trigger effect, Missouri was the first state now to ban abortion based on the overrule now in the case of with the Supreme Court. And then your awesome Attorney General here in Texas, he took
Ken
the day off.
Paxton.
He told, hey, everybody, this is going to be a holiday with the Texas Attorney General's office, that June 24th is the day of this victory, and that, here in Texas, again, we're going to see a victory for life.
Well, and Carl, I want you to know if you have any headlines there because I know we picked a couple ahead of time. Any that we should include here you think would help the segment out before I close it out?
Things that I think would help the segment is maybe next steps, what we're actually going to be looking at in terms of attacks from other sides. Sorry, I got voices in my head with the headset. Like, for instance, I think the Satanic Temple also has some trigger bills that they're trying to get passed in different states, allowing for abortion protection under their religious exemption. So I'm curious as to how that's going to play out, and I think it's worth bringing up in the conversation as far as, yes, this is a monumental, momentous day. It's great that we're going back to the Constitution, but in regards to the Constitution celebrating religious pluralism, what does that actually mean moving forward?
Yeah, so something I wanted to alert people to, you can go to other countries and see how the same spirit, because Bolsonaro in Brazil is like the Trump who's coming up against a very difficult re-election. In South America has gone Marxist. There's the other challenge is that South America, Colombia just elected a narco-terrorist as president, shockingly enough. So you're seeing in Peru and in various countries the move towards Marxism. And in Brazil, here's the story that's in the news now. And I'm just telling you, it's almost, you could watch there and see what they're going to do in the United States. Their story is now an 11-year-old gets raped and is pregnant. So here's what the left will do. I'm warning you ahead of time because we always go for the bait. They'll find a story, and that story will become the most exaggerated form of argument. It's kind of like the transgender kid who was harassed in high school and killed himself. That becomes the impetus for a bill because we got to stop persecuting transgenders. Nothing to do with whether it was a good idea for the kid to ever change his sex or go through chemical castration or the medical problems he had or the mental problems he had that drove him into that situation. That isn't discussed because they freeze the story around the transgender victim child in high school. An 11-year-old girl is pregnant because of rape, and they're saying, the pro-life side is, the pro-choice side is saying, are you going to force her to have this baby and because you're not going to let it become aborted? And then right away the sensationalism is 11-year-old rape and what, and the conservatives are going to take away this girl's future and her life.
Yeah.
You see how that goes? So watch for the left will come up with some scenarios. And then it's going to be pumped out on all channels as this is what we're talking about. It's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's time to share the stories of the rape survivors that didn't abort, and also the children of rape who are speaking up and are part of the pro-life generation. There are so many stories of hope, stories that show that in spite of what happened, God won. Something happened that person and their child, they're doing great. In spite of how it happens, that they didn't let that child carry the sin of that rapist. And like one survivor said, I'm not the residue of a rapist, I'm the resilience of my mother.
I'm not the residue of a rapist, I am the resilience of my mother. That's what I'm talking about. We have to prepare narratives ahead of narratives.
But a lot of these states have provisions for that. Like if it's incest or if it's rape, it's handled completely different. So when we try to make that the narrative, the reality is that's not a majority of abortions. That's probably 5 to 3% of abortions. The rest of it, let's just say 95%, is it's being used as a form of birth control. And so they will, I saw one the other day where a lady lost her pregnancy in another country and they're very anti-abortion and now she might die. And it's like, well, she has to have an abortion now. It's like, no, actually she has to have a medical procedure. The baby's already dead. It's not that you're killing a life. And so it's a medical procedure. But you're right, they will sensationalize it. I want to throw one more other thought in there to answer Carl's questions. One of the other things that's coming, which somebody was telling us about, is they're going to go after the morning after pill and try to make that you could just order it online. You don't have to go to a doctor for it. I think that that's one of the next things the left is going to do as well. And absolutely at a state level, like Carl's talking about, these things are coming. So we have to be ready. Like when we talk about civic engagement, we have to be speaking to our local state representatives,
Right.
And saying, no, that we don't want this here. I mean, thankfully we live in Texas, but like I'm saying, it's like for everybody who's upset about it is if you still live in California, you still live in New York, you can still go kill your kid if you want to.
Well, and there is a verse here that I've been working with. The Lord spoke to me something about righteousness shall be the plummet, justice the measuring line, and hail will sweep away the refuge of lies. And it comes from Isaiah 28. And the verse is linked to the Lord saying, I am going to break your covenant with death. I'm going to stop your agreement with hell. And I think that there's a connection between Roe v. Wade and the covenant with death and the agreement with death being the removal, in a sense, of one of the issues in the spirit that has been a gross injustice by design over our country. And as this agreement with death is now being challenged and you're watching the demon backlash, I think the next thing that's going to happen is that truth is going to sweep away a refuge of deception that we've been under. We've been dealing with the election. We've been dealing with the Hunter Biden laptop. We've been dealing with the pharmaceutical companies and the information they have not been sharing about negative side effects. Pretty much everything that I get banned for on the internet that is what I believe truth is now going to begin to come out. We've wanted the truth, but God has basically said, and it's an interesting statement I heard from a preacher recently, and I wrote it down, is that there are two things that work in the kingdom together. One is the promise of God, and the other is the principle. And if God gives you a promise of revival, recovery, restoration, survival as a nation, but you don't line up with the principles of God, then violating the principles messes up with your promise. We believe that God wants to save America. We don't believe this country belongs to the devil. We don't believe that it's a foregone conclusion that the enemy takes down your nation. But in order for that to happen, standing on the promises of, if my people that are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, then I'll heal the land, then these are the reformation steps you have to take for revival. Everyone that loves revival needs to know reformation and revival run together. The promise of revival is predicated on the principles of a just government. So we have to see things like this will happen in the courts, and that removes, in a sense, one big condition for the promise to be manifest. I believe we're going to see hail sweeping away refuges of lies. More truth is going to come out on injustice that has happened in America, and I think that the Lord is actually giving us time. And don't read the chaos that's happening in the streets as an indication of America going in the wrong direction. Read it as God is dividing light and dark. He's dividing good and evil, and he's revealing the root and the fruit of what's happening in American culture.
I would also want to add in there that I believe when church history is written, today is the day that will be remembered as when the Third Great Awakening outpouring started. Like, I feel that strongly about what's happening today.
Hallelujah. Well, you're tearing up again, Mercedes.
It's how you know it's the Lord.
That's how I know, I know it's the Lord. And so people can, you mentioned something earlier, because now you're going to have corporations. Woke corporations are on the side of Planned Parenthood and the leftists. But woke corporations are on the side of making money. And I think that the moment you touch their real God, which is prophets, you're going to see how superficial their devotion is to these ideologies. Mm-hmm. So if you don't like what you're seeing with Walmart ditching Mike Lindell, or the Uber going to give you your free ride to the Planned Parenthood facility, if you don't like that, then there's an alternative. And what is it, Mercedes? We talked about it earlier. We have the public square.
Public Square. You've got to go to lancewallnau.com/public square and download this free app. This app is going to show you all of the conservative businesses in your area that share your worldview. Stop spending money at these woke corporations. Stop. We've got to stop. We've got to hit them in the pocketbook. So go to lancewallnau.com/public square, grab this free app, and start shopping.
It's a free app, and it supports your local business people, keeps the money in your own backyard rather than going off to the big corporations in Wall Street. Nilsa, any final thoughts as we close out this segment? Any grassroots updates? Any word on what you see happening in the American battle on the front lines?
Well, there is a website I'd like to throw out there for anyone in your church. One of the most powerful tools are Christian voter guides when it comes to the get out the vote type movement. And the good thing is it's completely kosher with 501c3s. You know, it's okay for churches to pass out Christian voter guides. And the ones that I recommend are completely nonpartisan, and they're based on where each nominee for the elections this year, where they stand on all our critical faith issues. And it's not based on just what they said, but on actions that they've taken. So if you go to ffcoalition.com/guides, that's FF as in faith and freedom, coalition.com/guides. You can order a box of guides, and you can order a box of guides with door hangers and encourage your church members to take them to the neighborhoods. We've had so many people think twice about who they're supporting with their vote when they realize that the campaign is not saying what's on the guide.
Think about that. And I would imagine we'll have to do another episode sometime on how to approach pastors, because pastors are frequently politicians, and they're trying to avoid losing votes. And the way that they avoid losing votes is they don't get involved with politics. But we're living in a day where politics now is getting involved with your freedom. So you have to take a stand. You can't be neutral in Germany if you love Jews and you're watching a party that is coming after the Jews. You have to take a stand. So thank you for your participation, all of the panel today. I'm so glad you're here. Now, look, you want to like and subscribe. We're under incredible tech suppression wherever I go. So if you will like this program, if you will subscribe, if you will share it, it would allow us to break this glass ceiling that they're trying to put on us all the time. And I believe that the truth is getting out. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your partnership. And we're going to be keeping you updated on the ongoing revolution in America. It's a reformation moving in the right direction. See you tomorrow.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the